There's a sound that every car enthusiast knows, the unmistakable roar of a big block V8. But in 1966, Carol Shelby created something that made even that fearsome rumble seem tame. This isn't just another classic car story. This is about the Shelby Cobra Super Snake, quite possibly the most insane street-legal car ever built. Hey, if you love stories about legendary machines like this one, hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you're going to want to stick around for this. Picture Shelby standing in his California workshop one morning. He's already famous for beating Ferrari at Le Mans, already known for building the regular Cobra, a car that scared the hell out of most drivers. But something was bugging him. Something was whispering in his ear. What if we took it further? What if we built something truly crazy? Now, Carroll Shelby wasn't the kind of guy to do things halfway. When he decided to build the ultimate Cobra, he went all in. And by all in, I mean he created a car so powerful that its story still gives people goosebumps today. You know how some cars are rare? Well, only 2 Super Snakes were ever built. Just 2. Think about that for a second. This wasn't some limited production run. This was Shelby basically building the automotive equivalent of a nuclear bomb, twice. The first time they fired up that twin supercharged 427 engine, people say you could feel it in your chest. Not just hear it, feel it. The mechanics just stopped what they were doing and stared. They knew right then that this wasn't just another hot rod. This was something else entirely. Every legend has an origin story, and the Super Snakes begins with obsession. Carroll Shelby wasn't satisfied with just winning races. He wanted to build something that would make every other car on the planet look like it was standing still. You've got to understand, back in '66, if you wanted the fastest car in the world, you bought Italian. Ferrari, Lamborghini, those were the kings of speed. But Shelby? He had different ideas. He looked at his already brutal 427 Cobra and thought, let's strap not 1, but 2 superchargers to it. Now, I need you to wrap your head around what that meant. The regular 427 Cobra was already a handful. It could break loose in 4th gear. Imagine taking that car, that wild, untamed beast, and doubling down on the power. We're talking about 800 horsepower in a car that weighed about as much as today's Toyota Corolla. The funny thing is, Shelby didn't just want to build the fastest car in the world. He wanted to drive it to the grocery store. The Super Snake wasn't meant for the track. It wasn't meant for racing. It was meant to be the ultimate street car, the kind of machine that could eat Ferraris for breakfast and still be parked outside the local diner for lunch. They say that when Shelby first sketched out the plans, his engineers thought he'd lost his mind. 2 Paxton superchargers, special transmission, custom-built everything. But that was Shelby for you. When he had a vision, the word impossible just wasn't in his vocabulary. When you fire up a Super Snake, the first thing that hits you isn't the sound, it's the anticipation. See, in this 800 horsepower monster, every part was pushed to its absolute limit. Those twin Paxton superchargers weren't just bolted on. They were carefully integrated into a cooling system that looked more like something from a fighter jet than a car. Getting all that power to the ground, that was the real magic trick. Shelby's team had to basically reinvent the transmission. They started with a heavy-duty automatic. Because let's be honest, no normal manual gearbox was going to survive this kind of torture. Then they beefed up every single component until they had something that could handle the tsunami of torque this engine was producing. The real kicker? Those headers. Custom-built, ceramic-coated, and designed to handle temperatures that would melt standard exhaust systems. When you look underneath a Super Snake, it's like looking at industrial art. Every pipe, every connection, every single component was engineered with one purpose: to handle more power than any street car had ever seen. But here's where the story gets really interesting. Bill Cosby, yeah, that Bill Cosby, ordered one of these beasts. Story goes, he took one ride in it and immediately gave it back. Said it was too powerful, too wild. Now, when a guy who owns some of the fastest cars in the world tells you your car is too much, well, that's saying something. The scariest part? This wasn't some temperamental race car that needed a team of mechanics to keep it running. This was a street-legal missile that you could theoretically drive every day, though theoretically is the key word here. Driving a Super Snake in traffic was like trying to take a tiger for a walk on a leash made of dental floss. The engineering that went into the Super Snake wasn't just impressive, it was revolutionary. Think about this. In 1966, most sports cars were struggling to handle 300 horsepower. The Super Snake was pushing nearly triple that. Each component had to be custom engineered, not just to handle the power, but to keep the whole package streetable. The cooling system alone was a masterpiece of engineering. With two superchargers force-feeding that massive 427, heat was the enemy. Shelby's team developed an intricate network of oil coolers and modified radiators. They even had to redesign the hood to create proper airflow. Those iconic scoops weren't just for show, they were keeping this beast from melting itself. The rear end was another puzzle entirely. Normal differentials would literally explode under the torque. The solution? A specially built unit that could handle the power while still being reliable enough for street use. Even the half shafts had to be custom made. Nothing off the shelf could survive the Super Snake's fury. What made it truly special was how all these parts worked together. The Super Snake wasn't just a hot rod with more power, it was a complete package. The suspension geometry was modified to handle the extra power. The brakes were upgraded to stop this missile. Even the electrical system had to be beefed up to handle the demands of those twin superchargers. But perhaps the most incredible part? All this technology was packed into a car that still looked like a Cobra. No massive wings, no crazy bodywork, just subtle differences that only true enthusiasts would notice. The wider fenders, the extra cooling vents, the slightly different hood profile. These were the only hints that you were looking at something extraordinary. You know what's fascinating about legendary cars? It's not just their performance or their rarity, it's their lasting impact on history and culture. The Super Snake's legacy? It's written in tire smoke and record-breaking auction prices. In 2021, CSX 3015, one of our surviving Super Snakes, crossed the auction block and left everyone speechless. When the hammer fell at $5.5 million, it wasn't just setting a record for Cobras. It was making a statement about what makes a car truly priceless. But here's the thing. It wasn't just the price tag that made headlines. It was the story behind it. Every scratch, every mark, every detail on that car tells a story. The driver's seat, worn in just the right places from Carol Shelby himself. The paint, still wearing its battle scars from countless high-speed runs. This wasn't just a car being sold. It was a piece of automotive history finding a new guardian. But there's a darker side to the Super Snake story. Remember I mentioned there were two? CSX 3303, the second one, met a tragic end. Its owner, trying to tame all that power, lost control and drove it off a cliff into the Pacific Ocean. It's a sobering reminder of just how demanding these cars were, how much respect they commanded. Modern supercars owe a lot to the Super Snake. Sure, today's machines have more power, better handling, advanced electronics, but ask any engineer working on today's hypercars about their inspiration, and you'll often hear them mention this twin supercharged terror from '66. The surviving Super Snake sits quietly today, a sleeping giant that occasionally wakes to remind the world what raw, unrestricted power really means. When that 427 roars to life, it's not just an engine starting. It's a time machine taking us back to an era when cars were built on dreams and guts, not focus groups and regulations. This wasn't just Carol Shelby's ultimate creation. It was proof that with enough vision and courage, you could build something truly timeless. The Super Snake didn't just chase perfection, it redefined what perfection meant. In a world of carefully calculated performance figures and computer-controlled everything, it stands as a reminder of what happens when you let passion overrule common sense. You know what's really special about the Super Snake? It's not just a car from the past, it's a challenge to the future. Every time some manufacturer claims they've built the ultimate performance car, the ghost of the Super Snake lurks in the background, asking, "But did you really go all the way? Did you truly push every limit?" Think about it. In 1966, Shelby built a car so powerful, so extreme, that nearly 60 years later, it still makes people nervous. That's not just engineering, that's magic. That's the kind of achievement that turns a car from transportation into legend. So next time you hear someone talk about the latest and greatest supercar, remember this: somewhere out there, there's a Cobra with 2 superchargers that helped write the rulebook they're all following. A car that wasn't just ahead of its time, it was ahead of our time. Because sometimes, the most impressive thing isn't how far we've come. It's how far Carol Shelby and his team managed to go, way back when all they had was ambition, engineering skill, and the courage to build something truly insane. That's the real legacy of the Super Snake. Not just what it was, but what it taught us about what's possible when you dare to dream big.